Listen, I wanted to ask you about some other news and notes because, you're uniquely qualified to talk about some of this stuff. I don't know that you saw, but Bryan Danielson
I just had a leprechaun you accused me of banging. I'm not sure that I'm uniquely qualified to do much of. Well, I might be. I don't know.
Now that I'm thinking, I really am sort of second guessing some of my life decisions here. As it's 5:30 on a Monday where I live, and
You're calling Bruce to get him back by 6.
He did get a text during that bit. I will say that. I hope he's having a good time in Aruba. Danielson had a great comment that I wanted to ask you about because I felt like this was a great answer. He was asked about whether or not he would wrestle again, and he said something like, "My neck is wrecked, so it's not no chance, but it's risk versus reward at this point, right? So I want to be able to live comfortably with my wife and kids. One of the things our society has a real problem with is realizing when enough is enough. And I'm very satisfied with my career, and I think enough is enough." Now, John, I don't think for a minute that we'll never see Danielson wrestle again. We've all got our opinions about wrestling retirements. However, I do think this is, based on what we're reading here, the end of him being a quote-unquote full-time wrestler. Now, granted, full-time today means something different than it did 5 years ago or certainly 15 years prior to that. But what do you think of that? Enough is enough, and not enough people know how to say that. Your response?
I think there's not a right answer, and there's not a wrong answer. If Daniel has given his heart and soul to wrestling, and he's wrestled probably a lot longer than he should have, probably more than any normal doctor would have told him to do. That's a tough dude and a smart dude. I love Daniel Bryan. I think he's just a wonderful human being. I think he's wonderful for the business. I hate that enough is enough, but I'm happy that he makes that choice and he feels comfortable with it because he has a family to go home to. And whether he did or didn't, there are options. But, I understand both sides. I understand why Michael Jordan would play with the Washington Wizards a couple years. Because once you're done, you're done. Jordan's making $300 million a year. He's in a different level than everybody else. He was then too, by the way. But once you're done, he can only play so much golf for money. He can only play so many cards for money. He loved basketball. That was his last couple of years. I have no problem with guys playing too long, with staying too long. Most guys are going to live a long time, and you're going to be retired an awful long time. I've told guys a lot. It's a toss-up that you have, especially when your health is at risk. That's a real debate, and there's not a right or wrong answer. But I can certainly understand both sides. I can understand Daniel Bryan saying enough's enough, and I'm very happy for him. Very happy. But I can also understand a guy saying, you know what? I want to wrestle a few more times. Because once you're done, understand there's risk of more injury. But also, you're going to be done for 40 or 50 years. Depends on how long you live. And you're not going to get back in it. That window is a finite window. So I understand guys doing both. And I have no problem with either one.
I agree. I just thought it was refreshing to hear a guy who was pretty honest and forthright in saying, I want to go out on my terms. And this is my decision. I don't feel like I'm being forced to or I have to. And I recognize when enough is enough. And, just being content with your career, that's something that a lot of people I don't think ever really achieve. And I know that there are guys who had their last match and didn't realize when they were doing it that it was their last match. And I'm not saying that this is indeed Bryan's last match, but if he's content, man, I think that's pretty cool.
I do too. And I was there at WrestleMania, as King named it, and that was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like that. That whole crowd. I remember in the production meeting that day, we had built that up for months. And, people talk about the WWE as burying Daniel Bryan. It's hard to bury a guy when he's on 5 different segments of Raw. He was every single night. And I knew what the payoff was 2 months before. That was one of the best buildups I've ever seen done with Daniel. Of course, you had Daniel. That's one of the reasons that you could do it. But I remember sitting there and I remember asking Kevin, I said, are we ready for the 80-something thousand people chanting yes? And Kevin Dunn, and Kevin said, he goes, John, we got it completely covered. He said, we've already thought about it. We know how wild it's going to be. We got all the different camera angles to make it look as big as it is. And he said, we're ready. And they were. And that was one of the most incredible moments I've ever been a part of, to see that many people chanting yes. That was so cool. If Daniel had gone out after that, he'd be fine.
Hunter Dobbs says, as a Danielson fan, I'm happy for him. I am too. I'm really happy for that.
And, you know, Daniel loves wrestling so much. And when we do the JBL and Cole show, we were just having fun, just doing silly stuff. Daniel would dress up as different stuff and go in there. He was fighting a bear. He kept kicking the bear in the balls. I think it was Hornswoggle was in the bear costume, but he was just doing stuff. And they were like, Daniel, you're in the main event. You don't need to be on the little YouTube show. He goes, no, I love it. He'd do stuff with Kane. He just enjoyed performing and being a character, you know. And so I hate it for him because that's what he loves. But I love it for him that he's content to say, hey, enough's enough. And God bless him. I wish him all the most happiness in the world.
He also had another quote that I know is going to get everybody talking, and I wanted to share it with you. And I'm going to ask you a similar question with a little bit of a twist. He was asked who he would like to work for in wrestling if he could have any pick. Here's the exact tweet. Bryan Danielson was asked who he'd choose to run a wrestling company with: Tony Khan, Vince McMahon, Eric Bischoff, Triple H, or Dixie Carter. And Bryan said something like, this is my legitimate answer. People are going to assume that I work with AEW, so he's just saying that because it's his boss, but I would legitimately have Tony Khan. I think he's very in tune with what wrestling fans want, but he's also a good person. I'm not saying anything bad about anyone else, but I know he always tries to treat people with respect and kindness, no matter where they are on the roster. That's a nice quote, but the list is Tony Khan, Vince McMahon, Eric Bischoff, Triple H, and Dixie Carter. If you were going to work for someone besides Vince McMahon, because we know pretty much your entire career, you know, the parts that we recognize with you here on the show a lot are under Vince McMahon's watch. So if you were going to pick someone else, I don't know that you've ever even met Tony Khan. Did you meet Dixie Carter?
I did. I had lunch with her one time in Nashville, not over wrestling. I was just there on business, and she was there. And just out of courtesy, I called her and said, hey, would love to meet you. And, you know, we talked a little bit about wrestling, but not about a job or anything, but had a nice lunch with her. A terrific lady. Very, very nice. I was very impressed with her. Just what do you expect out of a great Southern lady? And I mean that as a compliment. I thought she was a true gentlewoman and a very, very nice person. So yes, I had a wonderful interaction with her, but no business talk with her.
I don't think
no business talk with her as far as, hey, do you want to come work for me? Anything. Right. We talked businesses, you know, in 10,000 foot levels of different things that we talked a lot of business, but nothing with, you know, solidifying a job.
Conversation about working together. Yeah. Have you met Tony Khan in person yet?
Yes. Apparently I met him one time, and I say apparently. I remember meeting him because I remember he came in with the Jaguars. And I shouldn't say apparently because I do remember meeting him. He came in with the Jaguars. We were like in Jacksonville or somewhere. And I don't remember if his dad was with him or if any other members of the Jaguars were there. But he was, I think, was representing the Jaguars at the time. And so that's why I say I don't know if his dad was there. Not that, you know, not that I'm throwing shade that his dad had to be there.
No,
you know,
no. I don't think. I want to be clear. You're saying he came in. You mean to a WWE show?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, came into a WWE show, and we were doing. I think we're doing something in Jacksonville. I believe it was what it was.
Yeah.
And I met him. Very nice interaction, but nothing. Again, he hadn't, you know, started up to even talk of forming a wrestling company at that time.
Well, hypothetically, you know, if you were forced, hey, would you want to work for Triple H, Eric Bischoff, Dixie Carter, or Tony Khan? Would you have a pick? I mean, I don't want you to answer Vince because everybody knows you worked with Vince. We're going to
sure, and that's the easy answer, and that's who I would pick because I enjoyed working for him, and I saw what he did, you know, from, you know, building through with the over the top network and everything he did. It's hard for me to answer in a fair way that's not biased because I've worked with Hunter and I've seen what Hunter has done.
Okay, let's take him off too then.
He was under the tutelage of Vince, and I think he's done tremendous stuff. And the scale of what Hunter's done, I think, is surpassed the others. Of course, he started with a higher scale too, but I think he's done a great job. So if we take away Hunter, then I think that's
Dixie or Tony.
Yeah, and oh man, I'm going with Eric. And not a doubt in my mind. Eric turned the company around that people thought could not be turned around. And he did a great job with it. And then a merger happened that pushed him out and pushed the company to the brink. I would love to have seen what he could have done if he could have found a way to extend the NWO for a couple of years, or if it would have fallen apart anyway. That's an answer we'll never know. But we know what he did, and that's taking a company losing a ton of money to making about $40 million a year, one of the biggest corporate turnarounds in history. And so anybody that's done that, I'll side with them. And I say that not knowing very much about Tony Khan or Dixie Carter as far as their business acumen, because I have not discussed business with them in that way that I have with Eric.
Yeah, I mean, you're familiar with Eric. You've drank beer with Eric, so that's an easy answer.
I wrestled with Eric. That little son of a, he like side-eyed me one time. We're like in Arizona or something one time, and I see him like trying to, didn't really try to take me down, but you can see him just kind of feeling me out. I'm going, holy cow, we're going to end up in the floor.